So we're back here again. 10 managers have come and gone from Manchester United since Sir Alex Ferguson retired in 2013. Ruben Amorim, the latest manager to go. Manchester United confirmed the news Monday morning at 10 a.m. And the press conference that Amorim did on Sunday after the Leeds game, a 1-1 draw, really gave me the feeling anyway that this was imminent. I had the feeling, I didn't sleep that well last night because I just had this, there's a multitude of things, but I had this feeling that Manchester United were going to do something and do it pretty early, because Ruben Amorim can't go and say the things that he said in a public setting about his bosses. He can't do that. And I thought that this was just a ticking time bomb. As I said on the last podcast, if you listen to it, I had the feeling that that was the end yesterday, and United have wasted absolutely no time at all in making this decision. Somebody stepped out of line. Ruben Amorim has stepped out of line with what he said. There are lots of little tidbits of information coming out over the course of the day. I'm going to try my best to round up exactly what's happened so far. With there's information coming from everywhere. There's managers being linked everywhere. I've seen this happen so many times before over the last few years, and I don't know how I feel about it. Am I numb to it? Am I relieved? I'm not sure. I'm a little bit scared in a sense that we're going to. Are we ever going to get out of this cycle? I have some optimism that we might, but you just don't know, do you? Just don't know. It is another one of those days where we've lived through too many of these over the last decade or so. My voice is going as well. That's not optimal for a podcaster, is it? But please stick with me. And I'm going to talk through my feelings and thoughts and on all the news that I can gather on this version or this episode of the Promised Land podcast. Thanks for subscribing, guys. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. We're all tired, and I'm trying, and I will always try to keep the never too high, never too low tone. And there is some never too low in me today that I will say in this moment, even though I do feel really tired and really fed up of, will we ever get a normal day? Like, Manchester United just don't, it's a circus all the time. Will we ever get a normal day of this club functioning properly? I hope so in the future, but you just can't escape nonsense wherever we go. Nonsense everywhere we go. And this is the latest thing that's happened. For what it's worth, I will say this, right? They have made a decision that they had to make, Ineos, today. They have seen Ruben Amorim go out and say what he said. I've already, as I'll probably explain throughout this podcast, thought that the last 18 months or so, there's been a number of displays by this new structure, by Ineos, which have displayed weakness. The Bruno decision that they essentially put on Bruno and said, you know, do you want to go or not? The decision to give Erik ten Hag an extension to his contract and then to turn around and 9 games later, end up sacking him. Weakness. You want to see decisiveness. You want to see strength. And I think United had to, when an employee, just looking at it this way, right? An employee has stepped out of line from what the plan is overall and gone public with it, been calling out his bosses, calling out his sporting director, the scouts, talking about Gary Neville as well. And I don't know whether he was making assumptions there or presumptions that, or like communicating something that he thought that people above him were being influenced by outside noise. Amorim, as soon as he said that yesterday, I just could not see this happening or this continuing for any real amount of time after this. It's a bad situation. Some relief, I suppose. Let's hope United can just come out of this and move forward and start playing better. But I do have that fear again of, are we just going through another cycle? Will we now see players just pop back up and feel like they can outlast managers? Because that's not a football club that doesn't scream putting power in the right place, you know? The decision was made on Monday morning, made official. And this is what the statement said. I won't do it all, but, you know, I'm sure you've seen this already or heard this. Ruben Amorim has departed his role as head coach of Manchester United. And it is very, 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 very funny you have to laugh in these situations, to see that United have specified Ruben Amorim as head coach in that top line of the statement about him leaving, and stated that he is and was the head coach, not the manager, like he spent a lot of time saying in that press conference that he did at Leeds. Now, I think for what it's worth, there has been some crossing of the wires there, and I think Amorim has felt like he has been sold a lie to a degree. But in terms of the semantics, Amorim from the very beginning in the appointment statement was labeled the head coach. And in the departing statement, he was labeled the head coach. So that's what he was. He wanted more influence. And it seems as though people trying to jump into the philosophy of how he saw football and recruitment, he didn't feel like he had enough power. And ultimately, this is what's happened. And yes, there has been a suggestion from the Telegraph, I think, that Amorim blew up in a meeting with Jason Wilcox on Friday. And they even knew before the Leeds game that this was going to be the decision that they were going to make. And I even thought, like, maybe Amorim also knew that this was coming after the Leeds game, and maybe he went into that press conference to say everything that he could have said before ended up leaving, knowing this decision was coming. Back to the statement. Sorry, this might be all over the shop. I've been talking a lot this morning. There's nice stuff said about, well, what he's achieved. With Manchester United sitting 6th in the Premier League, the club's leadership has reluctantly made the decision that it's the right time to make a change. This will give the team the best opportunity of the highest possible Premier League finish, which it will. Like, there can be potentially an uplift. We all know, if you listen to this, we all know that we should be expecting better out of the Manchester United team than we've seen for the past 14 months. This squad is better than the performances they've been putting in on the pitch. Maybe not necessarily the position they are in the table, but the reason why we have not been able to say with any confidence that United will finish in the top 6 or in the top 5. The reason why is because you've not seen enough in the performances to believe that they will get the results. The club would like to thank Ruben, they've said, for his contribution to the club and wishes him well for the future. And then Darren Fletcher will take charge of the team against Burnley on Wednesday. So we have, look, the games are coming thick and fast at the moment. United, over this January, December, New Year period, have games every few days, which is not going to be the case for the remainder of the season, obviously, with them being out of Europe entirely. But Darren Fletcher is the guy that's going to step into this role for, it looks as though it's going to be a short-term thing for now, although I think this situation is pretty live and is subject to change. But for now, we should be hearing from Darren Fletcher probably on Tuesday ahead of that Burnley game. So look, stick with the pod. I will definitely be doing a lot of talking over the course of the week, I think, because things are changing again. And like, it really begs the question, well, where the hell is this club going? Darren Fletcher's in, and I will say this, he isn't the idea that you will see people melting down about this. This is the logical, if you're changing manager, this is the logical current decision to make at the moment. Darren Fletcher's done well with the 18s. He's been in the club for the duration of his playing career. Obviously, he's been within the club for the last few years in different roles, and this is the first time he's going to get this opportunity to go on the touchline and be the manager of the team. He has his 2 sons in the first team squad at the moment as well. And look, I think as maybe disillusioned as we may feel at the moment, because like I know I've been communicated that I have some belief that things will be different under this new structure. I have said that. I still stand by it, but I'm not denying here by any means that they have not messed up, because they have. Like, I think it's pretty clear and pretty obvious that this structure, the people within it, the moving parts are all responsible really for more wastage in terms of money at United and for some more bad decisions. I'll get into that over the course of the pod, but like Darren Fletcher is in there at the moment, and that was the logical decision for Ineos to make, to put him in charge. As it stands, it looks like Fletcher will be in the dugout for the Burnley game, maybe the Brighton game as well, and then it appears at the moment that the plan is to hire an interim manager until the end of the season. For what it's worth, I don't think that can be Fletcher. I don't think it can be. I think you need somebody with at least top-level first-team managerial experience that kind of knows the club as well. It's that old cliche, isn't it? but we'll see what happens. Like for what it's worth, I'm like, let's try now at least and get fully behind Darren Fletcher. Let's hope Darren Fletcher can play a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-2, and not a 4-4-2, a 4-3-3, and we can just enjoy watching United again. Hopefully they can go to Burnley in midweek and get 3 points and just get the season back on track, because they've not been getting results against teams like that too often under Ruben Amorim. So that's a statement from the football club. David Ornstein broke the news just before 10 a.m. this morning. I've gone live on YouTube as well, so I've done another hour on there, and I just thought I needed to talk to you guys in a more coherent manner on the podcast, even though there's like information flying around everywhere. Ornstein broke the news initially and has basically suggested everything that United have said in this statement there. So credit to him. Again, always the guy to go to break the news on United. But we have then had lots and lots of detail coming out in dribs and drabs about what's actually happened here and why this has happened. So what changed? It appears as though there's been a breakdown in the relationship here. There's been differences in philosophies, transfer strategy, disagreements over recruitment, disagreements and being unconvinced over the system, and a lack of willingness to change by Ruben Amorim. It seems like all of these factors have worked their way into this, and that meeting on Friday that has been quoted, where Amorim blew up at Jason Wilcox as per the Telegraph, it seems as though that was essentially the final straw. If it wasn't that, maybe Amorim going out in that press conference saying what he said was the final straw. But like we've had a number of briefings from a number of different places. You know, there's loads and loads and loads of United journalists who get the same information, dig for a little more, and you get little tidbits out in certain places. But it seems as though, and the line from the club is here, that they felt Ruben Amorim was going into his shell a bit. There's a new piece from the Daily Mail Plus talking about how he had practiced in training, playing a back four, and then ahead of the Wolves game last week, he went into his shell and looked a little bit nervous as he communicated there was a change of plan and they moved to a back five. Wolves drew 1-1 at Old Trafford, could have won the game, and Amorim's system that he lived and died by in the end proved to be not the remedy for winning that game, you know? So, look, I have been on this pod talking about how Amorim needed to underline and make ground rules. I still think that will be a problem with any manager that comes in next. They need to lay ground rules and need to make sure that discipline is at the top of the table, and make sure that these players, some of whom have outlasted another manager, will go in and give their all in every single game. I really fear that we will have that, maybe a bounce, but then I just wonder, will we get to this point again down the line? Because I think one thing Amorim did that was good was establish those rules and stick by them, and didn't take, like, no matter who it was, he didn't really give a damn. You had to fall into line. And look, you can argue whether he was consistent with that across like different players, but at the end of the day, he felt as though, and what I supported him on over the course of his reign, was his willingness to get to the root issues of what I thought the problems have been. And I have fears, again, that we will revisit these problems down the line unless there is somebody in this football club that is looking at trying to fix those issues and rid the club of them. It's a cycle. We've been through these cycles. Amorim, while his football and the results weren't good enough, at least for me, he was doing that job. And I felt like we had to come through a real painful period. It just turned out that painful period was never ending. I felt like even until last week that we eventually would come out of the other side of this. It hasn't been the case. But that's because of a breakdown in relationships behind the scenes between Amorim and Jason Wilcox by the seams of it. Maybe Christopher Vivell as well. He was quoted as sending WhatsApp messages to the other members of the United hierarchy about his dissatisfaction with the system that Amorim was playing. But that meeting that Ruben Amorim had where he blew up, he was an emotional guy. He said he was going to quit, essentially, you know, a few times. He called Man United the worst team in Manchester United's history, which by the record It was, and it probably still is, I think. Improvements have been there this season, but ultimately you look at the body of work and the results that he's achieved, and you can't argue with this. But there are people who will definitely worry, and I'm one of them. But like I say, I'll get to why I think this maybe could be different this time a little bit later. It is just another indication that United aren't fixed yet, and this is still a big job for anybody to come in and sort out. Whoever the next manager is, I don't know how, unless everybody's pulling in the same direction and working together, how we're going to achieve turning Manchester United around. Ultimately, the fact that these guys weren't on the same page anymore, and Amorim was maybe unwilling to move into the wider hierarchy's vision or game model, that's probably why this has happened, with all the blow-ups maybe adding speed to the process. It is a disaster on Ineos's part, though, to hire him in November 2024 when he wanted to join the club 8 months later, to push him through and say it's now or never, and then not give him the tools and the money and the players to get him to the point where he could achieve success with the system he wanted to play. Ultimately, I think they've sold him short a little bit. And all he's saying, and what he said in that press conference, and all the switches that have been made around in the United structure since Amorim has come in. Like, think of this, right? Now, Dan Ashworth was there at the time when he was appointed. Dan Ashworth then was let go by the club shortly after. It is now Dan Ashworth has come out of this smelling like roses. You know, he seems as though he was right on this the whole time. And again, then letting him go is a poor indication on the structure that is currently there, on Jim Ratcliffe, on Omar Barada, because Ashworth, you could argue, could see this coming. He could see this coming. But the changes that have been made are maybe not a surprise to me that we've reached this point. Omar Barada has been the CEO, has been established. It was his pick. Ruben Amorim was his pick. They've pushed him to come in when it was mid-season. Amorim had his concerns already. He had his own concerns that maybe this team couldn't adapt to his system, and it took not very long at all to realize that wasn't going to be a thing, and United needed to plunge a lot of money into this and bring in a lot of different players. He must have been under the impression that United thought they could do that, and he must have been under the impression that he was going to get money. But there were a number of instances over the course of the last year where, and I'm sure this has probably contributed to Amorim feeling as though he didn't have all the responsibility and the job title that he thought he was getting when he agreed to join in the first place. The fact that they've had run-ins over different transfer targets, yes, Cunha and Mbeumo have made sense. I think everybody was on the same page with those. But you only need to look at the goalkeeper, for example. They signed Sene Lammens on deadline day this year. And while Lammens has come in and been good, like he has been quite good, we know who Ruben Amorim wanted. We know he wanted Emi Martinez. And he didn't get him. We know that Ruben Amorim wanted Ollie Watkins. Instead, Jason Wilcox and the Manchester United scouting team and recruitment team went with Benjamin Sesko, who's been a long-term target for a long time. But Amorim, in order to stamp his system and get it across and to get this system working the right way, I feel as though he needed experienced players and physical players who could execute the demands. Remember, he said, I want the team to run like dogs. A long time ago now, but he did say it. And that was the approach that he was taking to management. It was quite evident, quite fast, and we knew it already, but this United team generally don't run like dogs, and they can't. So it needed a big upturn in players. He needed more experience in the team, and like time after time, he was overruled. And I think when he was talking about being the coach and the manager, not the head coach, I'm the manager. He made a big point of saying it on his way out. I think it probably boils down to him not feeling as though he had as much control as he thought he was getting when he came in. The fact that he's missed out on those players that he wanted, the news about Semenyo in the last month or so, United have tried to get Semenyo. He's ended up at Manchester City. The decision that Wilcox made to go and sign a striker when Amorim wanted a midfielder. We all can look at the midfield and know that this midfield was never going to work with that setup that Amorim was doing. I said in the summer that I think United might end up regretting this potentially, but United feel, and this is still the plan ultimately, they still feel as though signing a new midfielder is a 2026 thing. I think the hope was maybe Ruben Amorim can get through this season and get into Europe and get enough buy-in from the club, from fans, through performances and results, and get that European achievement to get him through into the summer so he could get that midfielder he needed. But I think there's a few examples there of him being overruled and him talking about not being the head coach and being the manager instead. Maybe that hasn't matched up, regardless of like what is on the job title when you see it printed out on the website or in certain places. He may have had the impression that he was down as the head coach, but only in like name. Did Omar Barada go into those meetings and say that, yes, you'll have all this responsibility. Yes, you'll have the ability to do this. But then the structure changed afterwards. And Jason Wilcox was only made sporting director after Ashworth had left and after Amorim had been appointed. Christopher Vivell was only made into the position that he's in now, like earlier this year. So the structure has continually changed. And it's easy to see, really, where this disagreement could come from. Because I think there's been messages and then changes, and ideas and then changes to ideas. And ultimately, I think Amorim came in and thought, I want to play this way. I'm going to play this way. I'm going to see it through. And then you see yourself get undercut on certain signings. And it probably built up frustration with him. And maybe January was the final straw. But at the same time, and this is where like my never too high, where my never too low comes in, right? As much as I think Ruben Amorim needed that backing for him to succeed, and as much as I have been pro Amorim for a lot of this time, I would describe myself again as agnostic in the last few months towards the manager because the performances haven't been good enough. But knowing that he was trying to like sort the discipline issue out, I was willing to give him time. If he wanted those experienced players, if he wanted United to go and spend 40 million on Emi Martinez, 60 million on Ollie Watkins, that there is fraught with risk. You're buying or throwing money away. United throw money away as it is, but you are throwing money to a rival, and they are a rival now, Aston Villa in title race-ish. You're throwing that money away for two players who are 30 or over. And that ultimately is not good business because you don't have any sell-on value with them in the modern day. It's not good business. So what Amorim wanted was to be fully backed, like we had seen Louis van Gaal get fully backed, like we had seen Erik ten Hag get fully backed, like we had seen United in the past spend millions and millions and hundreds of millions for certain managers to work. What has happened in the past is those managers haven't ended up working. United have thrown that money into a specific idea of playing which a certain manager had wanted. The plan this time, and one of the cruxes of the departure for me, by the seams of it, is that recruitment and the fact that Amorim hasn't got that same backing from the people who are managing recruitment. Instead, and this is the nugget of positive for me, it does suggest that something's changed on the transfer strategy. They have made it clear, Ineos, that they will buy for a game model and they will buy for an idea of where United want to be, and that managers will have to fit into that. And ultimately, buying 29 or 30-year-olds for lots of money isn't a sensible way to run a football club. We've seen it over and over again. United have been burned by it a bit as well. I always think of like Eden Hazard joining Real Madrid for like 90 million quid or whatever it is at like 30, and then he has injuries for 2-3 years, and then he eventually retires. It's just money that you've thrown away. United have examples of that as well. Ultimately, the plan should be you buy players who can fit into systems, and this has been stressed in the releases as well over the past few hours. through sources within the club that's come out into media, they are only going to find a manager that will fit into the philosophy of how they want to do things. And they will only, you can't, they have to stop doing this. And they have stopped doing this. And this is the good thing about this. They will not go down the route of going all in on a manager anymore, because there's every risk, right? If they had gone for Ollie Watkins, if they had gone for Emi Martinez, if they had signed a midfielder who was maybe a little bit older and Amorim didn't work, you've then got a problem again. And it doesn't provide or give you continuity through managers. Ultimately, I see that there's ways to criticize Amorim, there's ways to criticize Ineos and the sporting department, but there's also, I can see their points of view in this direct clash that they've had between each other. And ultimately, for the good of United down the line, we do need to get away from buying players specifically for a manager and specifically for a system. The players they've signed, they feel as though can play different systems. And in Cunha and in Mbeumo, you could see them moving into a 4-3-3, right? You could see them moving into a 4-2-3-1. Cunha as a 10 probably works. Cunha can maybe work on the left side. And Mbeumo can play up front. And Mbeumo can play right or left, really. Obviously, we know his position is right. Where does that? What happens with Ahmad and Mbeumo now? Do they play in the same team? Are they going to get in each other's way? We'll wait and see about how United go about this. But there is still good quality players in there, and the argument has always been that they weren't platformed properly. And I take that. I guarantee that is an issue that United will have to get right now, and that is an upside of this situation and this process. At least now we can focus on Kobbie Mainoo getting minutes and being platformed the right way. Bruno Fernandes maybe goes back into the number 10 when he's back from injury. All of these players are put in the right positions, at least. And you should hopefully see an uplift from there. For me, the reason why I've not been all in on that is because of that issue that I've talked about repeatedly. The approach to the game has to be right. Culture before tactics. I still think that it's a big concern. I think that whoever the next manager is going to have to deal with that. They have to be strong enough to be able to shut players out if they don't feel like they're applying themselves in the right way. The manager has to have the power, or it'll be a head coach, won't it? But the concern that I do have is, how is this head coach model going to work moving forward now? Because if you have a head coach and he shows a dissatisfaction with a certain player, how much weight will his words carry to the recruitment team and to the team in charge of transfers? These coaches are the guys that know these players better than anyone and know their effort levels. I'm sure that they're tracking all the data and they can see that, but it's mentality as well. And I think Amorim was trying to get to the bottom of that. He said a few weeks ago that I guarantee you one thing that I am doing right. I've got the quote here. Outside the pitch, I guarantee you I'm not failing this club. He gets that, and this is what I put out on social, that he gets that attitude isn't always right in training or in matches. Against Leeds, they applied themselves, and they did. That was a fear that I had. If they hadn't have applied themselves right, I think they'd have lost. On countless other occasions against teams you'd expect United to beat, they haven't been up for the fight, haven't done the right things and not won 50-50s. The game is increasingly attritional in the Premier League, and they've struggled with that for so long. But look, again, this is not me excusing the tactics that Amorim has been putting out. But that, for me, is an issue which we cannot forget about. We can't forget about it. For United to actually turn a corner here, they need to rid that, Amorim called it entitlement a few weeks ago, they need to rid that out. And who's to say? Who's to say that new manager doesn't come in, or that a new manager comes in, sorry, I'm mixing my words up. Who's to say that a new manager comes in and gets rid of that problem? This is every chance that this could come around again. And in 18 months' time, we could be talking about the next manager failing because the team have had injuries and they don't want to play anymore, or they don't feel as though they're being put in the right place and they want to leave. And then the manager changes and a player miraculously reappears. I'm naming him here. I want Kobbie Mainoo to stay. I want him to stay for 15 years. But I see that his sister has put out a picture of her smiling on Instagram. And now Kobbie Mainoo's been out with a mystery injury for a couple of weeks. How long till Kobbie Mainoo's back in his team? He should be playing. But we know his relationship with Ruben Amorim wasn't any good. And that's the thing I want to get away from. For the record, like, you may take that as like an unfair jibe at Mainoo. I'm not intending it to be that at all. I'm just using it as an example that we can't have that moving forward. The power needs to be in the right places, established in the right places. And ultimately, the decision that Ineos have made here is in respect of that. They feel as though a person in their structure is punching above his station, and have made the decision very, very swiftly to get rid of him because he stepped out of line. That top-down structure has to be preserved throughout the entire club. What else have we got here? We got some other little tidbits of news coming out from different journalists. James Ducker has said this. This is from Manchester United. This is the messages that have come through, which he's relaying. United insiders say that while the head coach is a central part of the club's ecosystem, he does not sit above it, and that a collaborative approach and structure is essential to achieve success. I do agree with that, to be fair. United sources say, and look, Amorim stepping out of line with that and not agreeing with that and going public with his disagreement of that, ultimately, that's not a relationship that you can continue working in. United sources say the Old Trafford hierarchy have not seen enough signs of evolution or progress to warrant Amorim staying in that role, and play down the idea of power struggles or ultimatums. They say Amorim has had unwavering support across the board internally, and point out he was back to the tune of 250 million quid in the transfer market, making the club one of the highest spenders in the PL at that time. They believe the squad remains well placed to secure European football this season, which is true, again, but that a change was necessary to give the team the best chance of meeting that target this season. And they have stressed that Amorim is fully on board with the plan to prioritise the signings of 3 forwards, Mbeumo, Cunha and Sesko in the summer. Also of the belief that all recruits are versatile enough to play in multiple systems. There's that from James Ducker. Samuel Luckhurst has also done some tweets as well, and also done a couple of exclusives today. Repeating Ducker here, he said United claim that there have been no power struggles and that Amorim has been sacked as they have not seen enough signs of evolution or progress, but stress backing for the expert leadership team, as he's put in quotes. I'm not convinced currently of the expert word in the leadership team. I've got to be honest. And I am not going to, as much as I feel after what I just said about how I feel as though it's the right approach not to fully go in on a system or a manager if you don't believe in it, if it's not 4-3-3, for example, they seriously need to start showing that they're better than this, because the 18 months so far, the decisions they've made on Ten Hag, the Ashworth thing, the appointment of Amorim and the lack of backing. They've said they've backed Amorim, but really, we can all look at this and know that there's massive holes in that 3-2-4 or 3-4-2-1. We know there are. So they haven't backed him fully, and that's what United have done over and over again. They've backed to the tune of money, but not to the tune of getting all the team's problems fixed at one time. That's ultimately something that they're going to have to do. And I know that it will take time to bring the right players in. I know it will take time to make sure that this team has no gaps in it and no holes in it. Amorim and the fallout that he had, there's another story from Luckhurst here, which has suggested or said, United were unhappy with Amorim's criticism of academy players and first teamer Patrick Dorgu. I said it at the time, Amorim did not need to say the things he said about Harry Amas and Chido Obi, did not need to bring them into the conversation at all. I still agree that those players shouldn't have clapped back on social media. But he shouldn't have said it in the first place, and United were unhappy with that. He also then said Dorgu was anxious on the ball. And look, that doesn't help either, does it? It goes on to say, sources say Amorim told the United hierarchy he would use the first phase of his tenure to prioritise the team structure. United wanted a more stable foundation after the basketball style that had developed under Erik ten Hag. He reacted badly to feedback from Director of Football Jason Wilcox, who's been tasked with overseeing a game model. And I think they wanted to change formation, right? That's clear. Amorim was resistant to that, and I think that's been part of his downfall, really. And there's so much to dig into. There really is. I haven't really touched on candidates yet, but Ollie Glasner's name has been mentioned a lot. I'm a little resistant I don't know if the football that Glasner's been playing at Palace, but I don't think if you picked up the Crystal Palace style football and put it down to Manchester United with the average possession, I don't think people would be happy with that, personally. He's a good manager. But again, I do have those worries that you really need, now that you've made this decision, you really, really, really need to double down on all of the identity stuff that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. How United play football, embracing, attacking football, never say die attitude, bringing through young players. All that needs to be seen through somebody that you can trust, really. And ultimately, Glasner's a really good coach. He's been mentioned a lot, but I don't know who the favorite is exactly at the moment. And we're talking full-time appointment in the summer here. That's how it's looking. Glasner at the moment, he's out of contract at Crystal Palace, won't re-sign, so he's potentially a coach that they can go and get straight away. I just think, again, it's a risk. Kieran McKenna is a name that's cropped up before. He's worked at United before. I've previously thought that maybe that would make sense, really. But again, you have concerns about like how he will take to actually having the top job at United and not being a first-team coach like he was under Ollie. Darren Fletcher, obviously, I'm sure he will have a chance over the next few weeks to go and like stake his claim. There are other coaches, Xavi Hernandez as well, from Barcelona, potentially ticks a few boxes, but also he couldn't really hack the pressure at Barcelona. He might play a 4-3-3, have heavy possession football as a focus, bring through young players, but if you can't hack the pressure, can you hack the pressure at United? Michael Carrick could be an interim for the rest of the season. It seems as though that's the plan. Darren Fletcher takes the next couple of games potentially, and then you get an interim for the rest of the season to hopefully get United into the Champions League. For me, I'm not sure that is the right approach. I think there's enough time in the season left to bring in a coach that you believe in fully. The only indications are really that maybe they want to go and get somebody who is currently in a job, or look at the international coach market after the World Cup. That's way too late for me going into next season. Maybe that's the way that they want to go, though. There's certainly going to be a lot of speculation. I'm going to have to run through the candidates in a certain podcast coming up this week, I would imagine, talking about the do's and don'ts and the positives and negatives. But ultimately, I said this earlier, like, we can all have ideas of who the right manager is. I don't. And now, as much as I think that eventually down the line, United will fix themselves, I hope, and that's more today. I'm speaking in hope there more than anything else, because they have a coherent recruitment strategy. They have to get rid of that, underlying problem of, managers falling and players falling out with managers. But ultimately, whoever I think is the right choice, whoever you think is the right choice, doesn't matter. This is on the expert leadership team. As they've been dubbed, I'm sure that's language that has come out, and I've used it on social today at @_Scott Saunders, where you can find me. I've used that on social today after Luckhurst has put that out. He's probably been fed that information. If that is an expert leadership team, if that is best in class, it's currently not best in class, it's not expert, but they definitely need to step up now and show that they are best in class and show that they are expert, because a lot of people are not convinced that they are. So there we are then. I guess good place to wrap it up there, I suppose. There's probably stuff I've missed. There's loads of information that's going to come out over the next few days, and I'll be here to do more podcasts talking about all this. But the news is we've gone through another manager. Ruben Amorim has been sacked, and he went down in a blaze of glory, really, didn't he? Really protecting himself with what he said. And it had to happen, really. After he did that, it had to happen. I think he might have known it was happening as well. And that's why he went out and said what he said. But let me know your comments. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know how you're feeling. Let me know if you have a preferred candidate to come in. And I'll see you soon for another episode of the Promised Land podcast, guys. Please subscribe to Apple, Spotify, YouTube as well. All the links are in the description. Follow me on social at @_Scott Saunders. And I've got an hour or so before I go and do radio, so I need to give my my voice a rest for a little while. Until next time, probably tomorrow, maybe later today. I don't know yet. Thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for catching up. And will we ever get a normal football club again that just works? Remains to be seen. See you soon.